Welcome to Muddy River News this week. I'm Bob Goff. Gary Farha became the Adams County State's Attorney in December of 2016. He recently won re-election as he was unopposed and is in the middle of his second term. And today we're going to talk about some of the inner workings in the Adams County State's Attorney's office. Welcome.
Thank you, Bob.
Of course, we can't like get involved in active cases and stuff like that. I get that. So again, some broad strokes things just about your office and in your tenure. First off, I guess the thing I want to talk about is since you became State's Attorney, what has been the most significant change in the office?
Well, that's a very interesting question. I think prior to 2019 and the pandemic, I would have said just our approach to how we prosecute cases. We switched from having somebody that did felonies only and somebody that did misdemeanors and somebody that did traffic court to more of a vertical prosecution, meaning category of cases, whether they were misdemeanors or felonies, were assigned to an individual so that they could kind of specialize in those type of crimes. And we had people that were assigned to burglary and theft cases and people that were assigned to gun cases and things like that. I continued to take the drug cases. We also had a lot of different changes with how we proceeded, working with the judges, going to all grand juries instead of preliminary hearings, things like that. Then the pandemic hit, and I've said this to many, many people. The criminal justice system particularly did not work well with the pandemic and the things that happened.
Yeah, because the court system basically shut down.
Well, our office didn't.
Well, I understand that, but just the courts in general.
Crime didn't.
Of course not.
And yes, so there were category of cases that traffic court. We didn't have traffic court for a year, essentially, and with DUIs and things like that, that didn't work out well. We had to manage the jail and manage people in jail. And then along came the crime bill, and we saw how good that's going to work when that does take effect, because after building 192 capacity jail, we were back to only having maybe 100 people in that because of COVID. And so the result of that is we had a lot of cases where you had individuals with maybe 6 or 7 cases. And that's not good for anybody. And then you'd have people that were sentenced to prison and they were spending time in the Adams County Jail because the prisons were refusing to take the people that have been sentenced to the Department of Corrections. So we're hopefully at the end of that. We're getting better. Jail population now is in the 140s. I think it will eventually get up to where we were planning on it to be.
And speaking of the jail population, I know at one time the county used to, make a little money on the side by housing some feds temporarily. Is that still in play?
Yes, that's going to be in play. We've never done that before. There's a lot, Pike County does it. A lot of jails rely on that revenue because the federal government does pay a per diem that is pretty high. We've never gotten to that point. We want to get to that point, and I think we will.
So where are we on the COVID backlog? Are we caught up yet? Are we close?
No, we're not caught up. And it almost becomes a way of life because there's been so much delay that it does happen. I would say we're probably, we're getting closer. That would be the best way to say it. Just a point, I think we're on track this year to file between 850 and 900 felony cases. Back in 2012 or 2013, that would have been the number of felonies that we would file. My first full year in office in 2017, we filed over 1,200 felonies. So there are cases that have not been brought because of COVID, and there are cases that have not gone to trial. We're still dealing with cases that are 2019 or so, and part of it is these people still get in trouble, particularly the meth cases. Those are still very problematic for us.
Yeah, you don't, like you said, the crime and that activity just doesn't slow down, and sadly, it seemed that there were many people who used the pandemic as an opportunity to increase that sort of illegal business because they're like, they're really not going to do anything about it right now.
Well, and that's unfortunate. Somewhere there's got to be, and methamphetamine is a community-wide problem. It leads to other crimes, certainly. And at some point, we're going to have to approach it differently. Right now, what we try to do is we arrest all individuals that have had those charges. You know, there's a lot of people that say you shouldn't bring them into the criminal justice system. I disbelieve that. I think you need to somehow get them in a situation where you almost force them into treatment. That has been successful in some cases. In some cases, it hasn't. And again, the pandemic, because it stretched those cases out, particularly has hurt us. But meth is a real problem for this community. And unfortunately now we're also seeing, and I was very surprised by this when I learned it, but we've had some, I think somewhere around 10 to 13 overdoses this year where people have died because of drugs. It's not necessarily meth, it's fentanyl, and it's fentanyl that's disguised or laced in methamphetamine. It's laced in fake oxycodone pills and opioids. But unfortunately, we have seen, and it doesn't get publicized because they HIPAA and laws, but we've seen some families that have had to suffer that type of tragedy.
And and when you talk about that, another part of that I know your office is involved with that really doesn't get a lot of attention is trying to work with victims, trying to work with those people who have endured either that type of loss or who have endured some kind of loss, whether they had, one of their loved ones killed, one of their loved ones, died of an overdose, one of their loved ones perhaps committed some other crime. Talk about a little bit about victims advocacy and how important that is to sort of stop perpetuating this cycle.
Oh, absolutely. It's very, very important. We happen to have a wonderful victim witness coordinator, Tricia Hubbard, who has been with our office for a year. She actually suffered. She was the wife of a police officer down in the Metro East area, and he was killed in action. So she knows firsthand what it's like to be a family grieving for a loved one. She's very, very good. And in this era of COVID, and our office, we at one point had to divide our office in teams and work one day at the office, one day remotely. The only person that didn't do that was me, and as a result, I had to be barricaded in my office and really couldn't go amongst the troops just because of possibility of exposure. But anyway, one of the best things that happened to our office during this time is we've got a courthouse facility dog from St. Louis, an organization called CHAMPS. And that dog, he's a 2-year-old chocolate English Labrador, and he's just incredibly trained. We got him free. We raised over $10,000 to secure his being there without cost to the taxpayers. And Hoagie has just been great with victims. He is wonderful. He has enthused our office again. It's as crazy as that thing seems, but everybody looks forward to a couple times a day he gets loose. On purpose, we let him roam the office. And he comes in and he's just really a refreshing breath of fresh air. And the victims love him. And
I think, we've always, I know in my years as a journalist, I've always tried to do my best to, in any organization I've been involved with, to try to protect, the identity, because, again, when someone screws up or when someone's alleged to have messed up or whatever, obviously that person, there's going to be a discussion about that. But the victim has already been hurt enough, and the victim is already dealing with so much that I've always tried to make sure to err on any side of caution when when it comes to a victim's name or what have you. I've always thought that was really the victims have enough going on, and to try to sort of facilitate that, and they're gonna be bothered enough by a story that's gonna be out there anyway.
Absolutely, and that brings home a situation that happened in the last week and a half, and we're already dealing with that person, and that's the case that got a large amount of publicity, the Bradley Yan,
Sure.
Karen Blackledge case. But the victim there, one of the victims there, is a woman in her 70s, and she had things happen to her that nobody should ever endure, certainly not a 70-year-old.
Right.
Very reminiscent of a case back when I first started in the 1980s, where a local physician and his wife that were in their 70s, she was raped, and the physician had to sit and watch that happen. So yeah, those people are immediately traumatized, and so we have an appointment with her next week, and we're going to make certain that she gets referred to counseling and things that she needs to do, and we will do what we can. The main thing is just to console her, to make her know that she's going to have an opportunity to talk to us whenever she needs to, and that we're going to really advocate for her. That's huge.
In the Yan case, again, and it's an ongoing case, so we don't want to get any details, and some other cases that have recently landed in your office, one of the things that people have to realize is that in this big world we deal in, many of the criminals or many of the people who have allegedly done something wrong, they usually don't just keep their activities to one place. You always have to deal with multi-jurisdictional issues. How has that been over the last, in your tenure there? Has that gotten easier? I don't know if that's a COVID thing or not, but I'm just talking about maybe political climate in general. You and many other people have always contended that a sheriff's office or a state's attorney's office should not be political. You should run as an independent. There should be no titles there. How has it been though in trying to deal with these other counties to try to work with and do what you need to do for justice?
Well, we've tried to within the 8th Judicial Circuit, which is our county, Brown County, Pike County,
lovely Menard County.
Menard County, Schuyler County.
I did some political work in that race,
yeah,
so I remember it well.
Cass County,
yeah,
and Calhoun County. We work well together. Zach Boren at Pike County, we talk probably once every couple of weeks. We work really well with the federal government. We have a great relationship with the Central District. They take some of the cases from us with our consultation, our blessing, because that's important. For whatever reason, criminals fear the federal system much more than they do our system. But there are some problems, and I mean the Yan case is going to highlight a lot of problems because of the situation in St. Charles where they had released him accidentally, but he had not posted any bond. So if he was subject to, I think, a $50,000 cash bond. If they had not released him, none of this crime spree would have happened. Right. So it's interesting, but for the most part, I think one of the things that has unified all the state's attorneys in our area is the stupid crime bill that got passed in the dead of the night prior to January of 2021. And again, that was an interesting situation. We've talked about it many times, but I was on conference calls with all the state's attorneys, and there was only 2 state's attorneys that favored it. All the others, there's 102 state's attorneys in the state of Illinois. Every one of them voted no. They were so upset at the process, of the fact that the Black Law Caucus had the complete run of that bill, and Democrat, Republican, it didn't matter. We were all against it, and I think, and I hope I'm wrong, but I think we'll see the results of that coming up. things like no bail and things
Right.
like that, where you just get released. And I think, unfortunately, the governor's office felt like that was some type of huge victory because we were more liberal than California when it came to that.
Yeah, it's yeah. I know. I've talked about this with Rob Copley and some other folks about this as well. So I completely understand. When in deal, you mentioned the feds a while ago, or just trying to work with others. There have been occasions where you've had to bring in, a special prosecutor because of conflicts or whatever. Obviously, the most well known of that was the Curtis Lovelace case. But what is the threshold when you have to give an Ed Parkinson or David Robinson or whoever's doing that? What are the things that sort of look at you and some of your colleagues when they're like, well, okay, we really need to have another set of eyes on this?
Well, one of the more known cases involved our coroner at the time, Jim Keller,
Sure.
and some of the things he was doing, which unfortunately really never got out to the public because of the way the case went. But as the state's attorney, we advise all public office holders. And so in reality, he's my client. But he's also done some things that need prosecution. That's an obvious conflict.
Sure.
And unfortunately, he got a situation where he pled guilty to an unlawful possession of controlled substance. He had 32 garbage bags full of medications that he had taken from individuals. That was not a possession of controlled substance. That was a possession of a ton. And so I had a little disagreement with how the prosecutor handled that case, but it's his case at that
Sure.
point.
I understand.
You basically look at it from the standpoint of, is your ability to do justice compromised because of your knowledge of that individual, whether you liked him a lot or whether you didn't care for him or something like that. So you do have to look at those issues. And after having, I don't want to say burned, but after having had that experience with Jim Keller, we've tried to stay away from special prosecutors as much as possible.
Okay. Lastly, let's talk a little bit about just how you function in your role in acting with the Adams County Board. Obviously, the board controls the purse for the entire county. They set budgets, things like that. And this is always the time of the year where they have to set the budgets and set the levies. How directly is your office involved in any of that process, aside from the fact that you say, hey, here's my budget, this is what I need it for, please grant me as much of it as you can?
Well, one of the things that happened during the campaign was I promised to be at every board meeting. I promised to be at as many of the committee meetings as I could be. We wanted to take a more active role in advising and trying to stay on top of that. We do a lot of things. We are involved in union negotiations. In the past, we had hired Rick Scott, I believe. Mm-hmm. I may be wrong. It's been a while since we dealt with him. But in a year, sure, he charged us $80,000.
Wow.
Good lawyer, but that's a lot to take. So sure, we took on that role. Worked with the HR department, the Human Resources Department, Sue Hester at the time, and went through the negotiations. There's 13 negotiating bodies that sure, we with county government. So there was a lot of different things, but we think we saved a ton of money for the county. We along the way we've learned a lot. It's an interesting. The county board has kind of made a lot of changes, and it's gone from kind of older white gentleman's conservative body to a little more realistic, more females involved, more younger people involved, and I think the county board has evolved to a group of people who are very interested in modernizing. things like the infrastructure that is going on, a $1.1 million project of upgrading the infrastructure of the IT in the county. It's a very important thing because of all the requirements that the General Assembly has made for law enforcement, retention of records, things like that. I think this board has worked on things like that in a much better way than perhaps in the past.
Yeah, I think it's been an evolution because you had to build a new jail that was $30 million. Of course, you have the county highway department, and then you have crimes and courts. I mean, those are kind of the three big pillars of the government, of county government that people really, that's when people are like, well, what's county government do? Well, you got the jail, you got the highway department, you got the board, ambulance, another part of that. It's a very large and diverse group, and again, it's just in any other situation, you have to be able to adapt, and you have to have people who are committed. And again, the county boards, I mean, it's nothing that, a lot of times they don't get. Their meetings aren't streamed like the city council meetings are every week, or the school board meetings every month, and you kind of want to just sit there and soak it in a little bit. I mean, I've been fortunate enough that I've covered county board meetings off and on for the last 25 years. So, I've seen, gone from John Heidenbretter to Dwayne Vemberlo to Brett Austin on the finance committee. So yeah, there's an evolution there. All very smart, capable businessmen, but all have their own style and way of doing things.
And one of the interesting things is with county government, and this will be coming up next year, every 10 years after reapportionment, all 21 of the county board members have to go through an election. So a county board can change very quickly and change directions. The county board right now is dealing with something they've never dealt with, and that's the influx of $12.7 million through the ARPA funds, or the American Rescue, whatever it stands for, which is quite interesting because with those funds come a lot of stipulations, things that I'm certain that the Adams County Board would have done if allowed to do so with this money, which was pay down debt and prop up the different funds that would need to in normal circumstances need to be propped up. But there's very good news on the county government front. I mean, the ambulance department has solved a huge deficit in very quick time, just with better management, better billing practices, better payouts. That was a big drain on county government. The Adams County Health Department does a great job. Jared, I think his budget request this year is so low just because he knows the grants. He does a great job with that. So there's a lot of positive going on, and at the same time, they're finding ways to spend the $12.7 million over the 2 years that will benefit Adams County, hopefully.
Final question then, since you brought up Jared Welch and the whole, when the county was going through all of its COVID struggles and dealing with jurisdiction on who gets masked and who gets vaccinated, it seemed to me like that the state was, there were certain areas where they just tried to do overreach, but then there were certain areas where they were hands off and the Attorney General didn't issue certain opinions. I know your office took some heat, Jared's taken heat, everybody's taken heat over how to do this, but the bottom line was there were a lot of people who were just scared that if we don't do this, the state's going to pull our funding. And wasn't that the bottom line and the motivation for most of these things?
Yes, and what was really traumatic is I didn't pursue this office to be dealing with some of this stuff. We're not trained for it. All I know is like closing the businesses and complying with the governor's mandates and things like that. I come from a family of shopkeepers. Right. I know what it would have meant to close businesses, and I wasn't going to be a part of it. And I don't think Adams County had the appetite to be a part of it. People I respected got on me terribly for not doing that or not enforcing the mask mandate. That's just not who I am. That's not what our community is either. And so Yes, we did take some heat, and we continue to take some heat. One of the things, when you do an analysis, what is the state's attorney's biggest responsibility? Prosecute crimes. How do you prosecute crimes? You ultimately end up with a jury trial. How do you win jury trials? You have the confidence of the people. If we do something controversial on non-criminal cases and we come in with a jury venari of people that are absolutely mad at us because we affected their lives, that's a real problem. And, you know, do I feel bad that we lost a number of people in our community to COVID? Absolutely, and I'm going to have to live with that. And I didn't want to participate in that, but at the same time, I don't think government should be telling us what to do in our personal lives. So really difficult situation, really uncomfortable situation. And, you know, for the first time since I've been doing this job, I lost enthusiasm for the job just because of those decisions, which are something we're not trained to do.
All right. Well, on that note, again, I want to thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Bob.
Gary Farha, Adams County State's Attorney. And that's Muddy River News this week. I'm Bob Goff. Thanks for watching.